So without further ado, let's get going. I'm sure we have a lot to get through. So my name is Andrew Graff. I'll be moderating, and I'm joined by my colleague Gerard Henley, who many of you probably know. He'll be moderating the Q&A session. And most importantly, we have a panel here of folks who have taken action on behalf of their institution to better serve not only the students, faculty, and staff, but internal teams at their institutions, and they'll be sharing their experiences thus far. And obviously, what I would encourage is, as you all have experiences that you think would benefit the group, please post those to the community. I think this is a time where the benefit of the openness of higher ed cannot be understated. So let's all try to help each other through all of this. So we have Richard Musil, Director of Client Services and Operations for IT at Manhattan College. We have Suzanne Levy, the Information Technology Training Coordinator at Manhattan College. And then we have Melissa Rycroft. So she manages technology training programs at Bucknell. So welcome everybody, and we appreciate your participation. So the first question for the group is, can you walk through what you believe to be the highest impact changes you've made in terms of how you support your end users in these times? I think that's really important. So whoever would like to start, that'd be great. And then we'll kind of rotate who goes first. So anyone dying to jump in on this one?
I'll go first, just because it's hard to do anyway, and why not take that responsibility? So you're welcome. So I think some of the things that were notable changes were, the remote, right? So we have our student employees as well as our full-time employees are all remote now. For our full-time employees, we've had a decent amount of experience with that. Where we had conferences and things like that, that doesn't mean that the work stops, and you have to be able to jump into a meeting or handle some emails or tickets even while you're remote sometimes. So from I think the IT perspective, we were generally well prepared for that. I think the students a little bit less, but I think so far they've been doing pretty good. One of the things that we are a G Suite school, so we enabled Google Voice for our students, technicians, so that they could still, and routed the calls to those Google Voice accounts so they could still answer the phones. So really the only thing that is technically lacking is that on-site support. And I think probably the students especially had to get a little used to not being able to just run out and help people, since we are a small campus. And I would assume that there are some other small campuses on this call as well that could relate. Some of the larger campuses might already be used to being a little bit more remote support. We're used to just running out because it's like a quick 2-minute walk to somebody's office more often than not. So I think that's probably one of the things that especially student technicians have to get a little bit more used to, is that restraint of like, okay, I really have to solve this over the phone or over ticketing an email or over Google Meet. That's the other thing we're using a lot when needed, is Google Meet, so that the client can share their screen and we can kind of talk them through and fully see what they're doing. So that's kind of the progression, is phone call or ticket, trying to do it that way, and then if needed, getting Google Meet so we could actually see what they're doing. We do have somebody that goes in maybe twice a week, and we're limiting that to loaner laptops. Basically, what we decided is we really can't sit there and troubleshoot people's machines. So what we'll do is, if somebody does have an issue with their machine that cannot be resolved remotely, we're just saying, forget it, just come in, get a loaner from us, and we're trying to do that handoff, zero contact, keeping social distance in mind. Susie, if you think I missed anything, please chime in, but I think those are the big, from a tech support perspective, and I think there's questions later that are going to go over knowledge base and things of that sort that I'm sure Susie will jump in on.
Yeah, I think you're good, Rich. I think you covered all the big stuff there.
Melissa, how about your team?
So I'm not sure if you know a lot about Bucknell, but we're completely residential, no online learning prior to the current situation. Everything taught in class by faculty standing in front of students. So this has been a really dramatic change for us. I suspect we were somewhat uniquely positioned in that we had planned and intended to launch a new client portal on March 9th. So that was the first day of our spring break. And we'd actually been working on this for months and had that date selected for several months, that on March 9th, we were launching a new client portal with Team Dynamics. And it just was sort of the perfect synchronicity that we had been out doing promotional activity on campus and talking to constituents and showing them this great new thing. And within the space of a week, it became sort of the only thing, because our tech desk in person is now closed. The building's closed. There are almost no students on campus. There are no technicians on campus. And so it worked out really amazingly well. Although I can assure you, we had no idea when we were planning it and designing it what was going to happen. It was pure luck on our part that we brought up all the tools that made this work as well as it has right at the start of this. So I will say that that's the biggest high impact change. We went from having the vast majority of our tickets come in via phone or email or walk up, and in the space of a couple of days had switched that to the vast majority of our tickets being self-submitted through the client portal. We had always hoped that our end users would like it and start using it. In terms of forcing them to use it, obviously this has done that. Not the way we wanted, but that was the outcome, that they have to self-submit their tickets as much as possible. So it worked out really well. And I will say that when we were planning this, our client portal is built by myself and my coworker, Allison Morse, who works in tech support. We're both front-end support. So when we were building our client portal, we were focused on what are the people who ask us questions need. And we were really coming at it from that direction. And so in everything that we did in that week, the months leading up to, and then that week of March 9th, it was, here's the client portal, here's the knowledge base, here's how you submit a ticket. And we were just really emphasizing that over and over and over again, so that when the campus was, when students didn't come back at the end of spring break and then the campus closed down, lots of people knew how to find the knowledge base and submit their own tickets.
That's a great story, and we'll get to a little bit. For a question I think you'll be able to take lead on is, how did you promote it? Or get in a little more specific way, and how do you continue to promote it? So we'll move to the next question, and this one, just to give the audience some idea of where you've seen increases in volume. We don't have to spend a whole lot of time here because there's a lot of questions that are actually practical, but this is just a reference point to help people understand, hey, are we seeing the common types of influx? And if you haven't seen it yet, maybe what do we want to prepare our knowledge base or our services to be able to handle? So if you could go through, maybe Susie and you, or whoever from Manhattan wants to answer, did you see any spikes in certain types of requests?
So I'll go on this one. So definitely VPN and remote desktop. And one of the things that Susie's going to probably talk about later too is helping people understand what that actually means, because we got a lot of requests for things that people didn't actually need. Part of the thing that helped with this, and we didn't help plan it either, is I'm trying to remember. I think it was in January. Yeah, it was in January. It had to be. That's when you started, Susie. In January, we did a big rollout of MFA, multi-factor authentication, to decrease the need for VPN, because there was a lot of things that required VPN prior. We did not plan it for the coronavirus at all, but it was like a happy accident. So that was one thing, is just trying to educate people for what they actually need. One thing I wish we did sooner is almost like a fire drill. So actually, if you guys aren't at the point yet where you have to be remote, please consider forcing 1 to 2 days of everybody being remote ahead of time. Because what we found is, once we were forced remote, there was a lot of people that didn't realize what they actually needed. So we're scrambling, remotely to try to get these things to them, where it would have been helpful, to be on site to do that. So if it's possible, although probably most of the nation at this point is already remote anyway, but if possible, I would recommend being remote before having to be remote. And one thing that I'm kind of trying to lobby for at our institution, I don't know if we're going to do it or not, is to maybe once a semester have a forced remote day where the campus is like fully remote, kind of like how we do fire drills, so that like some of this stuff can get worked out. So sorry, I lost my train of thought a little bit there. The largest things were definitely VPN, remote desktop, Google Meet, and Moodle. So there's a lot of people that were not doing any remote teaching because they were more traditional and they didn't really feel the need to prior, that now we're like, oh, now I have to learn this stuff. So a lot of LMS or Moodle requests, a lot of Google Meet requests, which is what we use for the face-to-face online learning. And oh, the other big one is loaner laptops. So especially for the administrative offices that have a desktop in their office and that's all they use, most of these offices don't necessarily have laptops. So we've been dealing with a lot of loaner laptop requests, and even actually for students that, you know, either a student doesn't have anything, or we noticed a large number of, for example, engineering students that have Macs, and then there's free software, but it's Windows only. So trying to mitigate all that, and we've done that with a combination of loaner laptops, and where possible, we use a tool called Aporto, which is a VDI provider, like kind of SaaS VDI. So that's kind of like, I think those are the main things. And Susie, it sounds like Susie is agreeing that those are the main things. So I'm going to stop talking now.
Okay. Melissa, how about Bucknell? Where have you seen the large influx? It's similar to Manhattan?
Absolutely. It's pretty much all of the same stuff. For us, it's Zoom. And so we got a site license for Zoom in the middle of that week of March 9th. And we had to figure out how to transition users who'd created accounts with their created personal accounts, but used their Bucknell email address. And so we had to help get them all switched over and teach them, you know, really what are the features? How do you set up Zoom for a class as opposed to a meeting? How do you do office hours? But Zoom, definitely the VPN. We had the same situation where folks were assuming they needed the VPN for everything, and we had to talk them down for, let's not do that. We also brought up a virtual VPN so we could dramatically increase our capacity, because we realized that there were things students did need the VPN for that they had never needed when they were on campus. Also Moodle, where we use Moodle, and so there were faculty who had never used it the way they have to now. So they may have put some supplemental readings there or used it for grades, but all of a sudden they're saying, well, how do I get this video? What do I do with this PowerPoint? You know, actually putting their teaching materials in Moodle. We use Kaltura, and I think that we had a fair number of faculty who didn't know Kaltura existed. And so all of a sudden we're saying, if you're making videos, they need to go into Kaltura, and they said, you know, wonderful things like, it's great that we have this. We've had it for a while, but it was wonderful that this was a reason to discover it. And also, yeah, we have a VDI product, you know, that we call Remote Labs, Remote Desktop. And then, you know, just in general, we have so many end users self-submitting tickets, and we ask the very minimum of them. Who are you, and how do we get in touch with you, and what do you think is wrong? And it's been just amazing to see the flood of self-submitted tickets as people put them in, update them on their own, and sometimes withdraw them before we even get a chance to look at them. Has been pretty wonderful, but the volume of tickets has been at moments just quite astonishing.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing there. I have a couple related questions we'll get to here in a moment. So, you know, if we look at some stats, right? We did a poll with HDI some time ago, and I just wanted to recall this, that, you know, self-help, the good news is self-help from an industry standpoint has been considered a must-have more frequently than other industries. So I think that education was ideally prepared. So this gets back to, I guess, as follow on to the first question. And Melissa, I'd like to start with you, because you have made the most, I would say, dramatic shift in how you serve your constituents. How did you how did you and how are you driving this adoption? Can you walk us through what you did to get people to flip the switch from being used to calling and other channels to using the self-service portal?
Absolutely. So in our sort of rollout process, really the months of January and February, we had meetings with most of our constituent groups to say, here's a new feature we're rolling out, give them a preview of it, let them actually log in and touch it and see how it works. Get really important feedback from them on things that made sense and things that didn't. We did a lot of tweaking in those months. And so it meant that a lot of people had already had their eyes on it and had been in and tried submitting a ticket and knew what it looked like. We also presented at one of our university staff forums. So the staff forum where all of the staff of the university can either gather in the room or watch remotely and see something like this. And so pretty much all of those folks had had a chance to look at it. And then really critically, we had buy-in from all of the levels of the university that as they were communicating, as this sort of crisis unfolded, that they made sure that they were including a link to the client portal in almost every one of those messages that had offered some sort of resource. So if we were saying, here's how to get the VPN, how to use Zoom, everything had a link in it that went to the client portal. It was incredibly consistent and persistent in the communication efforts. And so the provost, the dean of students, the vice president for library and IT, all of those messages had links that went to the client portal, either at the top level or to specific knowledge content that was in the knowledge base, or even just to our quick ticketing form so that people could submit their own ticket. And we just persistently repeated, this is where you'll find the answers. And then, also making sure that everyone who's got an away message, the away message has a link that goes to the client portal. If you've got an out of office message on voicemail, it has the quick URL to go to the client portal so that we can just be very consistent. If people are trying to email or call us individually, we're just saying, here's where you go, submit a ticket, and then we will take care of it.
That's great. The link from the auto respond and on the voicemail, those are exceptional ideas. Now, the students, so they were gone at spring break. You made this shift, and they came back, new world, right? Had the emails? Do you know approximately how many emails were sent with this information reinforcing this for students?
I haven't counted. We tried to be, so first of all, there was absolutely no messaging for me or anyone in my department. The messaging happened very high level, messages from the president, the provost, the dean of students. And whenever it was relevant for those to include a link, they did. I could count, but we tried to not overwhelm them with communication. And there were targeted messages that went out to faculty saying, here is when there's a session happening, things like that, so that we could be sure that we were being very consistent in what we were encouraging people to do. And it was really wonderful to have that buy-in at the top level of the university to include the direction that we really wanted people to go.
Great. And Susie and Rich, what have you been doing? I know you were doing self-service earlier, but given this shift, what has changed?
So we have like a very good communication. We have a Manhattan College ITS blog. We can put things in our announcements. So we've sort of been using tools that have already existed for communications to kind of reinforce what we're doing on our end. So this could be anything from, best practices for creating a ticket, because as everybody's noticed, we've seen an influx in certain types of tickets. So we created some communications about how best to create a ticket to get the fastest service, especially due to the fact that we don't have on-site support right now. So we're doing a lot of encouragement of faculty and students kind of trying things out on their own and kind of meeting them at their level and giving them the resources they need to do that, but using constant communication always with between our blog and announcements.
Great. Thank you. So another slide here talking about knowledge management being must-have. Once again, education was at the top of the list across multiple industries, which I think was, fortuitous for this particular situation. And also KCS adoption was pretty high too in comparison to other areas. So knowledge-centered service to those, that this, obviously is a great tool for making sure that you have the right content, continue to curate the content to self-serve. So have you, or what new content have you created in your knowledge base in the light of this move to distance learning? So can you walk us through the process you went through to do that? Any changes in how you organized your knowledge base? Anything of that nature? So maybe start with Manhattan.
Sure, I can definitely speak on that. So since the start of working remote, we have definitely reorganized our knowledge base. We've compared that to the tickets we're getting and making sure that we have information in our knowledge base that is relevant to working and learning remote, and that information is readily available through Less Clicks for faculty and students. So just a couple things to highlight that we've sort of pushed out as high level categories are free software that's available for students. Rich mentioned that, some students are using programs that need to be used through like a computer lab or something. We don't have a computer lab, so we're making sure that they're aware of the use of Aporto. We just got an On the Hub subscription, which is allowing students to download Windows 10 for free, as where they were coming to us for upgrades and things, they can't do that now. But some of the knowledge base articles that we've created in the last week and a half are about like mapping network drives, things that maybe people would be coming into us for, and we didn't necessarily need to have like a client facing article for, maybe just for like our, ourselves or for student workers. But we have churned out quite a few very technical knowledge-based articles in the last week or so to support faculty and students that are home and kind of need a quick fix. We've really pushed out the best ticketing, like best practices for submitting a ticket. As we're getting all of these tickets, we're trying to give people as much information as they can, so they can give us as much information and we can get back to them as fast as possible. Our team's been working really, really hard and done an amazing job through this. We've also created quite a bit of articles. We use Google Meet, as Rich said. Anything that has come up in ticketing, almost anything, a KBA has been created and pushed out to our community about screen recording, screen sharing. I'm working on one right now about creating like breakout groups, because certain other things like Zoom, you can do that. It's a little different in Google Meets. Audio, best practices as a moderator for Google Meets conferences. And that's pretty much for like professors and like big meetings that are happening now. If you're organizing a Google Meets, like what's the best way to do that? What are things you need to do beforehand, things you need to be doing after? If you record, where your recording's going. Basically, as much information as we can push out about the tools that campus is using right now, we're doing that. So we're monitoring ticketing very closely and meeting very regularly to discuss the things that the campus needs while we're all working remote.
And from the perspective of creating knowledge base articles where they're needed, how is that done? Does the technician create them, or are they bubbled up to a group of senior people? Can you walk us through? Okay, so you are the master of the knowledge base.
Yes, but we've been meeting like very regularly, our team, to sort of go over, is this necessary right now? Can we wait? Can this one wait till a little bit later? Are we seeing more of an increase in need for, mapping right now versus Google Meets? Like, we're kind of meeting as a team though right now to make sure that we're putting out the appropriate information in the correct order. But yes, normally it's my domain and I kind of, and also the other thing I'd like to say is we've gone through, myself and my colleague Alberto have gone through a very decent portion of our huge knowledge base and make sure that we think anything that could possibly help people if they're searching the knowledge base while working remotely, we're making sure that it's tagged remote, so that when people are searching through the knowledge base, you know, more things come up. We also have a top level category, like I said earlier, labeled working remotely. And there's a whole bunch of like very relevant things about like G Suite and Google Meets and you know, remote desktop and things like that. But we went through, like, we did like a whole, you know, thing, and we went through it and tried to tag as many things as we thought were relevant.
Okay, great. Melissa, how about Bucknell?
Well, at the same time we were bringing up the client portal, we actually switched our knowledge base from our previous product into Team Dynamics. So when this knowledge base went live on March 9th, it was the first time anyone had seen it in this form. That was one of the things that we were doing in January and February, was that I was working with our knowledge base authors group to be sure that we had the content that people need most frequently. And in many cases, making sure that we were rewriting that, taking new screenshots so that it looked good in this format. And when we were designing the client portal, we had in the center section this current IT news, where we thought we were going to feature, whatever we thought was interesting at the moment. And very quickly that transformed into the absolute top articles that people needed to be able to see. And so it wasn't sort of the fluffy, happy content we thought it would be. It was, what's the nitty gritty, folks need to know this. So if you get a chance to look at our client portal, I encourage you to do so. The current IT news in the center features our top level FAQs. And this was something that we spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks working on, which was to make sure that whatever your question is about Zoom, you can click on a Zoom FAQ and it will get you to all the articles about Zoom. You don't have to search. You can look down the page and you can see content from us, content from Zoom itself, from the company. You can see the videos from LinkedIn Learning. You can actually see videos we've created on site. And those are dynamic. As a new question arises, we're creating a new article and then linking it to that FAQ. And so we can keep that Zoom FAQ front and center in our client portal, and everyone can find it easily. We also really have been working hard to, similar to what Suzanne said, make sure that anytime a question comes in and that is a question we haven't documented, we write it so that the knowledge base authors group gets that right away. And we do have subject matter experts from across library and IT. So we have someone from our engineering computing team, someone from the phone office, a couple folks from digital pedagogy and scholarship, folks from the tech desk. We really try to have a good cross-section of library and IT included in that knowledge base authors group, so that whatever the request is, we have someone who can quickly turn that around and get content published. Obviously, this wasn't quite the way we thought this was going to go. We did do some reorganization, very similar to what Suzanne said. There were moments where we're like, okay, lots of this stuff is not important and different stuff is. And so how do we feature that and make that easier to find? So I think that our top level FAQs, our teaching continuity guide has been really the most important thing for many of our faculty. Just how do I do all this stuff? Well, we actually have a guide to help you figure out how to do this, and it links to all of the tools, the resources, quickly and easily lets you submit a ticket if you need to. We do have an off-campus access guidelines and resources for folks who've never been off campus before, which is many of our users. They've never tried to do any of this stuff when they were remote. So we have to help them figure out how to do everything. Our Zoom FAQ has been, as I mentioned, it's been really invaluable to have that and be able to just send one link and say, please take a look. It covers all of this. And then really being responsive. So in one of our early sessions, a faculty member sat down with me and said, okay, how do I do advising appointments? Well, that's a great question, right? How do you do advising appointments? We use Google appointment slots in the Google Calendar, but now what? And how do you integrate appointment slots with Zoom? How do you merge these two? What do you send out to your students? And so in an instance like that, it's a matter of writing the documentation, and for anything that's more complicated, actually recording a video. So you'll see that we have a video up there because there's a lot of moving parts in something like that. And so I don't know that I've ever written so many articles in such a short amount of time as I have the last couple of weeks. It's been truly amazing, but we've been really persistent about making sure that multiple people put their eyes on each thing to make sure that it makes sense. We're really flexible in understanding if someone says, I don't understand this paragraph or that instruction's missing a step, not being at all territorial about, right, someone else can step in and fix it if what I wrote doesn't make sense. And so I think that's helpful in making sure that our content is high quality. And it's sort of related, but I think I just want to mention the other thing that we've really been emphasizing is making response templates fast and furious. So if we get 3 or 4 tickets for the same thing, we want a response template so that everyone can answer that question and they're sending a consistent message. And so, for example, over the weekend, one of our VPN settings changed. So first thing Monday morning, we had a new response template. We could send that out and everybody who was working tickets could be sending a consistent message. Here's what you need to change in your VPN settings. It referred them to the knowledge base. And it really helped us be functional for a high volume of tickets in a very short turnaround.
I like the use of the knowledge article authors group. I think that's really, really strong. Have a group of SMEs that can answer things and that anyone can make a change to anyone else's content. You know, hopefully this sets a healthy precedent for collaboration going forward as we inevitably will come out of this. And then also, I thought it's really interesting, the response templates. So as you see evidence of a volume of requests, creating those response templates to not only speed the response, but make it consistent. I really thought that was great. So we're going to shift gears a little bit to more of an in-house focus for everyone. So everyone is now, well, most people, I'm assuming, have moved to managing remote teams rather than working together in the office. So I want to spend some time talking about this. So the first question here is, what are you doing differently to facilitate the teamwork that you used to do in the office? Rich, we haven't heard from you for a minute. Do you have anything to opine about here?
It was so hard to not talk, but I did it.
You did a great job, Rich. I'm really excited.
All right, so I think I want to say a trifecta of Team Dynamics, Google Meet, and Google Chat. Our whole
That's
team.
my favorite thing to do.
Oh, I just had my Google Home just started talking. Sorry, got distracted there. But anyway, so Susie could attest to this, that pretty much our whole team is actively chatting pretty much all day long. So we have in Google Chat, which those of you that don't have chat probably have either Microsoft Teams or Slack. It's all very similar. I'm sure they all have their own different nuances, whatever. But we have I have a room for our whole team. There's a room for just my client services people, and then also we have our just like individual chats here and there. There's also we also have a chat room for all of ITS leadership, so all the different directors and the CIO. And throughout the day, we're just constantly talking. I actually think we talk more now than when we were on campus, but that's actually the best practice. They say that, you know, if you're remote, you want to be communicating more often. Email too, but I think a critical thing is Team Dynamics. I mean, we've been using it the way we always did anyway, but what is it? I have this line in most of my presentations that I talk to people. I always say it allows you to keep your finger on the pulse of all the work that's going through the organization. So that's a critical piece because we can quickly see something. Hey, nobody jumped on this, and I could jump on one of the chat rooms like, hey guys, somebody on this, and then they're like, oh yeah, we are, or whatever, things of that sort. And then when needed, we'll jump on Google Meets. I think I probably Google Meet with Susie the most. And I think it was saying yesterday that, you know, we have kind of like these waves as the week's been going on. Like Monday and Tuesday were kind of slow, and then it got picked up. But for Susie, it's been like up, like for like the last 2 weeks. Probably the same for Melissa. And I think if I missed anything, Susie will jump in, but I'm going to stop talking again and try to.
Right, looks like you got the thumbs up, Rich. Thorough and effective communication of what you're doing. So, Melissa, how about your teams? What are you doing to keep the wheels on the bus, so to speak?
So we've had a practice of having a morning huddle every day. Technology support for many years we've met in person just at the beginning of the day to run through what are the tickets that people are stuck on, what important is happening today, and we've done that in person for years. And when all of this started, one of the things we did, a couple of things. First of all, we transitioned that to include all of user services, so that it also included my coworkers from classroom and events, because really we're functioning as one big team right now. And so there's not a lot of distinction between tech support, classroom support, and event support. Really everything is a classroom and event support at this moment. And so we're working together. And so we added them into that morning huddle and moved that to Zoom. And so we're meeting Monday through Friday, first thing in the morning, to really just check in. How's everybody doing? Everything working? What happened during the night? If there were things that popped up over the night, because we do have many remote users who are around the world, and making sure that we're all in a good place to start the work. And who's going to be unavailable for what periods of time. We work all that out first thing in the morning. One of the things we added was an end of the day wrap up. So we're now meeting again in the afternoon, in the late afternoon, about 4 o'clock. Again, everyone from user services is invited to a Zoom just to say, what came up today that we weren't anticipating? Where did you offer people instructions and it didn't work? What do we need to change? What do we need to do differently? And partially, this is really about just helping us all stay sane and keep ourselves together. Partially, it's because we're an incredibly social work group. I've joked that we're the social butterflies of library and IT. I think that's true. And so we maybe need a little more FaceTime with each other than other work groups do, just to check in and say, how are you doing? Someone showed up this morning or yesterday morning when his Darth Vader mask to the morning huddle, because we're that sort of person. And if a costume helps you, that sounds great. But we really do need to just be always in contact with each other and saying, where is someone stuck? Where do you need help? A lot of that one-on-one communication is happening in Google Chat. So if you need to talk to one person, keep it in that. But we do use Slack as well. We have channels for all of the departments in this division. I will say that the tech support channel is by far the most verbose. I don't think anyone comes close. And so we noticed that folks from other departments check in and update us in our channel. Hey, here's what's going on. And so Slack has been really invaluable in terms of we've never had so much communication across the whole division as we have. We're pretty good. We've been good for quite a while at communication within my department, but we very quickly expanded our understanding of our department to suck up the staff from other related areas, primarily classroom and events. But then I think that across the board, I've communicated more with my coworkers all the way across the organization than I have, probably in quite a while. So it's been particularly effective. And I do know when to mute Slack. I made sure I shut Slack down before I started this webinar, or I don't think there's ever been an hour without a Slack message.
Sure. Well, great. That's all excellent insights. So just in general, are there any other tips or tricks that you can offer that we may not have discussed thus far? So we'll start in order of the webcams. So Rich, that would be you in the first slot here. So anything that we haven't discussed that you think would be valuable for people to know to help better serve or manage work?
I think we covered everything, but I'll just kind of be repetitive with certain things I think are super important. If possible that you're not already remote, I would say try to encourage people to do that kind of like fire drill thing, even if it's not forced by leadership. Just trying to get communication out there like, hey guys, we're very likely going to be remote. Go home, try to do everything you could possibly have to do in the office. at home and let us know what you couldn't do so we could figure that out before, it really super matters. I think that's like the super big one. I think the other one that everybody's touched upon too is kind of like looking at metrics. So kind of trying to, and it doesn't have to be like, going super crazy with data, just even just things you notice, like everybody's mentioned that we have these meetings, like what are you guys noticing a lot of, picking out those things and getting knowledge articles or response templates out about that. Because again, like I tell all of my team, if you think you're going to have to say something more than once, make it a response template, because it's just so much quicker than having that to, retype the thing over and over again. I think the only thing we may not have touched upon, which I don't know that we're necessarily doing either, but I think it's something we should do, all of us. If there are people that are doing things really well, I'm not necessarily talking about IT, I'm probably thinking more about faculty, but if there's some faculty that are doing some innovative things really well, it might be good to try to collect that information and communicate it out. It might be good to do like a live stream or something where that person demonstrates that thing that they're doing. I would say probably the best way to do that is maybe through like the instructional design team or structural technology team, because they probably work closely with the faculty and can probably know what they're doing. Maybe, or having that team reach out to deans or whatever, and then trying to collect that information. Maybe do some live webinars. I think I'm out of ideas for the moment.
Okay, great. Suzanne, how about you? Anything we didn't cover that you'd like to add?
Sure. So I'm kind of going to do what Rich did, just some repetitive things that I think are really good is encouraging faculty to test things out on their own. Traditionally, there's always a lot of support, as I'm sure everybody here knows, on IT. IT gets leaned on a lot for things, just for comfort of mind when people are setting things up and trying out new things. And this is a good time to sort of make those articles, those technical articles that maybe your campus is used to IT doing, things that obviously make sense for anybody to learn, but sort of encourage them and give them the support that they need during this time to try things out on their own, because they might get faster results if they do that. The other thing, I know it's a little fluffy, but all of like the leadership at Manhattan and IT has been just incredibly supportive of everybody as a whole, the campus, IT's own employees. There's a lot of things that need to get turned over fast, but nobody is demanding, and there's just been a lot of support. So I think, Rich is great, very, very supportive and grateful, and our CIO is the same way. And I think that's sort of leading by example with showing that support. This is a difficult time. People are freaked out, don't know what's happening. And, that blurred line of working at home, as we were all saying that, like, the days are starting to blend together a little bit. You're sort of kind of working like the whole day. And it's just nice to have, support from upper management. I know it's a little fluffy, but as far as employees and teamwork goes, it definitely boosts morale, I would say. I think that's all I have to offer.
Great, thank you. Melissa?
Just a couple of things, but I definitely want to confirm something that Suzanne said, which is that having support of the people who are not the frontline support, but they're seeing what we're doing, and they've been incredibly supportive and encouraging, and that really makes us feel good, like we're on the right track. We've heard great feedback from faculty who said, this has all been so helpful. Our teaching continuity sessions, where we had about 200 of our 350 faculty attend sessions over the course of 2 days, and we could just say to them, here's everything that needs to change and how the tools you're going to use, and really walk them through that. We had hours and hours of Zoom drop-in sessions, pretty much for an entire week, where we had staff who were sitting in Zoom waiting for faculty to just drop in and ask questions. And some of them did over and over and over again. Sometimes people came in once and they had a specific question. They got routed to a breakout room with someone who could help them with just their Kaltura question. But having our staff just be available remotely or in person up until the point the university closed, so that faculty could ask anything. I will say that it was very, very strange to me to be standing in front of a group of faculty talking about classroom management. As someone who Zooms a lot, it was interesting to say, this is going to be very different from anything you've ever done before. Here are some of the things that can go wrong in a Zoom, and just lay out for them. It's the barking dog, it's the cat, it's the baby, it's the washing machine. It's, all those sorts of things that, they're going to be so different from classroom instruction. And so I think that was helpful. And I just saw so many big eyes in the room, like, oh my gosh, wait, what do you mean? What could happen? I did do a session just for our academic assistants, because in a way they're almost the most important people. If they feel like they know what's happening and they can help the faculty, then they're a huge asset. And so I'm really glad that they were all able to attend, to ask their questions. And I had a coworker from Classroom and Events and a coworker from Digital Pedagogy and Scholarship who could say, okay, academic assistants, what questions do you have and how can we support you? And the last thing is that I had to be a little bit persistent with my coworkers in saying, if you need documentation in the knowledge base, or if you need a new response template, or if you need a ticket to be changed, put in a ticket. The barrage of requests occasionally becomes overwhelming. And so I haven't been quite so firm with my coworkers, but in this scenario, it's got to be in a ticket because I just can't keep track of all the requests otherwise.
Great. Well, thank you all for that. We're going to move to open Q&A, and my colleague Gerard is going to moderate this. So we've seen some questions come in. Gerard, I'll hand it to you to ask the panelists some of the questions that have rolled in.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. And, we've already had some great questions come in, and I do thank everyone for their kind attention to the material and also for their interest. So what I've been doing while the questions have been coming in is some of them I've been tabling, and we'll address those. We've also had some tips come in, and I thought that what might be fun is to make sure that even though I have been sending those out to the group, that we also make sure that we go through those. So one of the first questions that came in was from Daryl, and he was asking about using remote tools like BOMGAR, for example. Any successes, any stories around that? So it looks like the panelists are some folks who maybe haven't used remote tools like BOMGAR, but we have heard during this unique time, we have heard from some of our other customers that are using BOMGAR / Beyond Trust. They've recently changed their name. That their use has gone up, and then they found it to be very, very useful. For those of you that don't know, we are full integration partners with Beyond Trust, and that chat functionality is a great tool. So although we don't have anything from the panelists about that, I think anecdotally we've certainly seen that this is one of those things that can really replace the live person that you might share some space with sort of that virtual interaction. So with that, let's go ahead and move on maybe to something else. Adam actually asked if anybody has had to support students in China, and if so, accommodating those students. And I think that Melissa, I see you nodding, unlike Rich and Suzanne, who are emphatically shaking their heads now.
Yep.
Melissa, I'll call out to you, and I think also additionally, not just specifically China, but really any of the bridging of the gaps in terms of time, time zones, in terms of any other issues. So Melissa, please go ahead.
Absolutely. We have a significant population of students who are from China who've returned home. And so we've really been trying to do our best to meet their needs. Obviously for them, classroom instruction that is asynchronous is a priority. And it's been important to emphasize that with our faculty, that if they're doing some sort of synchronous teaching, it really doesn't serve our students well if they're in China or Vietnam. Even, I was helping a faculty member who's the faculty member is in London, the students are all here, figuring out when you're doing that. We have had to make some tweaks to our VPN configuration. We're trying our best. We do use Google. So, one of the questions is, how do they just get mail, right? They can get to Moodle, but can they read their email? Many of them have it forwarded to another email service so that they can receive messages. Their faculty need to be understanding that, they may receive a message that isn't from an email address they recognize. So we're doing our best to make as many tools as possible available to them, with the understanding that some of them are unavailable and some of them may be very slow. And so really prioritizing asynchronous teaching for any of those classes where the faculty know they have students who are abroad. We've had a few faculty who surveyed their students and said, for this class, they're all on the East Coast, no problem. That's great. But it really is important for the faculty to know what time zone they're in and if they are in a country that makes it difficult to communicate with them.
Hey, Melissa, thanks so much for that. And I am actually on another tab in my browser actively trying to steal the term asynchronous teaching. So thank you for that. All right, so as we look, another question from Trenton was handling software access needs for student and employees. Anything about that from any of our panelists? Rich, I can see the wheels turning, but if not, Melissa, yep,
Yeah,
okay, the wheels turn. Melissa, you also have something to add for that?
So we've really worked at making sure that our knowledge-based content is very clear about what software is available for faculty, staff, and students to install on their own, on their personally owned machines. We've had a number of vendors who've offered us 90-day free home use licenses. And we're making sure those are clearly identified in the knowledge base so that everyone knows when those end. So for example, if it's Mathematica and it ends on May 23rd, it's clearly identified in the article that, hey, all of our faculty and students can use Mathematica up until that date. So some of our vendors have been just amazing at stepping up and saying, we know you can't use the software you're paying for that's in a lab. And that's true, we can't. So how do we get the students into that? And so our software FAQ lists all of those, tells the students and faculty how to access it. And we're actively directing them to that content, as well as our VDI content, if that's what's appropriate.
Oh, that's great advice. I really appreciate that. So I'm actually going to go ahead and talk about some of the tips that we got in line as we go to the questions. One, I want to make sure I don't skip anything. And also it might spur some other folks to ask questions. Before I do that, though, let me also add that, the rich text editor within the client portal can be used to insert links, maybe download links to software. And also you can add files to download right within those knowledge-based articles and those services in the service catalog. So don't forget to utilize that rich text editor as well as the ability to add files. And if anyone needs any assistance in that, don't forget that Team Dynamics support is open, and we can certainly help you with that, as well as our client portal has a lot of good information about managing that. But again, I just wanted to point that out. One of the tips came from Sarah, who said that they actually created a shared Google Calendar used for team members to indicate simply if they're in and out of availability. I think that was when we were talking earlier about different ways in managing co-workers and co-working, right? So somebody had asked about Melissa, what was the online chat tool she had mentioned? That was Slack, and that's just slack.com. So I wanted to point that out. One of our other tips was Adam had said that they had recently instituted a bring your device home recommendation, so that if people were sort of stuck in that, hey, don't come to work anymore, then at least they can rely on their device and any information there. So one of the other questions that we got in, I think this is a great one for the group, and this is from Travis, is how did you manage and prioritize compliance while trying to get things done quickly? For example, accessibility verification, new content, inventory tracking for equipment, software purchasing. And Melissa, I think you talked a little bit about some of that, maybe using some sort of real world workarounds for some of that software purchasing and maybe working with people and vendors. But anything else in terms of managing and prioritizing any of those compliance issues? You know, let me turn that over to the group.
Absolutely. So every time one of those requests came in, the first thing that we did was rolled it over to our software licensing team to say, what can we do with this software? And so prioritizing that so that we weren't, so that we didn't start down a path that we couldn't complete because it wasn't allowed. And so I strongly encourage that, you know, before you start touching, is it possible? It's important to say, is it legal? And so, and I also really relying on coworkers in other parts of library and IT. If there is something that can be done remotely, it's legal to do it. Okay, then how quickly can we get that up and running? In many cases, very quickly. And so I just encourage you to rely on your coworkers whenever possible.
That is great. Thank you so much for that, Melissa.
So I
I'm
was
sorry,
going to
go
say,
ahead, please.
so from Manhattan, we had a lot of that stuff already done in advance. So we had actually been piloting a Porto for a little over a year. So there was some software already up there. And what we basically would do is, if there's software not already up there, people just make those requests. And then similarly to Melissa, we have a desktop operations group that would review it. They have a pretty good idea of the software licensing, and they've been processing those fairly quickly. In regard to software that was freely available, that was already up there as well. And then software that could be installed, same. We had like a knowledge base article for a few years now that shows all the software that's requestable. And one thing I was going to mention before is we also have Quest Case, which is a imaging and patch management tool. So that allows us to hypothetically, well, not hypothetically, allows us to push out software remotely to people as well, that software that's requestable. So
That's super helpful, I think, and I will invite my colleagues to let me know if I'm mistaken. But I think we're almost at the end of our time. There was one more question that came in that I just wanted to see if anybody might be able to answer very quickly, which is, how do you encourage faculty to move documents from their own PCs to a network drive? Any thoughts about that that we can use to wrap up our session? I see it's
Repeat that question. I didn't. The end of it cut out.
yeah, yes, Susie. It's about encouraging faculty to move documents from their own PCs to a network drive.
Yes, we do that.
we also do that. We use Google Drive, and that was one of the things that the unnecessary requests for remote desktop were those that didn't realize, I guess they weren't aware or whatever, so they thought that they needed a remote desktop to access the files on their computer. So whenever that would happen, they basically got a canned response with directions on how to use Google Drive, and yeah, that answers that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Suzanne, do you have something to add?
I was just really quickly going to say that before this whole thing started too, we have a monthly campaign to remind students and faculty to check in with their Google Drive and make sure everything that is backed up, and that's still happening through all this.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone, all the panelists. This has been very valuable. I'm sure there's been lots of takeaways, and thank you, everyone who has attended, and those who, especially those who submitted tips as well. I would highly encourage us to continue this dialogue on the Team Dynamics group, the community groups. If you have ideas, things that are working, challenges you're having, especially if you're struggling with something, put it out there to the Team Dynamics world. Everyone is really, really helpful. So I encourage that, especially the newer customers who may not have been there. But anyway, thank you all so much. This has been very, very valuable, and everyone have a great day. And this will be recorded, or it has been recorded and will be sent out. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.